Again, breaking news out of college basketball, and this involves Jay Wright. He is retiring as head coach of Villanova. That was first reported by our Matt Norlander. The Hall of Fame coach won 2 national titles during his 21-year run with the Wildcats, taking them to the Final Four 4 times, including this past year. Fordham's Kyle Neptune expected to be his successor at Nova. This, according to CBS Sports' John Rothstein and Matt Norlander. Huge news from college basketball. Let's get some insight in this and bring in a CBS college basketball analyst, Avery Johnson and Gary Parrish. Gary, I'll start with you. The impact that Wright made not only on the Villanova basketball program, but the Big East as a whole.
You can't overstate it. This is a man who is already in the Naismith Memorial Hall of Fame, who won multiple national titles, went to 4 Final Fours, and did it all with the respect of his colleagues. There are plenty of coaches that have accomplished a lot at the collegiate level. They're not all respected by their colleagues, but Jay Wright was. To that point, just last summer, when it was announced Mike Krzyzewski was retiring,
Yep.
Matt Norlander and I polled more than 100 college coaches and asked them a simple question. With Coach K on his way out,
Yep.
who should be the next face of college basketball? And Jay Wright got 38% of that vote. Nobody else got more than 20%. That's how respected he was within the industry. And to have him walk away at the age of 60, which is, relatively speaking, for coaches in the sport, very, very young, is obviously surprising and not great for college basketball in general.
When I look at Jay Wright's career, fortunately, I was one of the few guys that you're going to talk to today or interview that coached against Jay Wright. And I coached against him in the 2018 NCAA tournament. And when I think back to that one particular game, just preparing for that game was a daunting task. But think about the class, the style, the culture he built at Villanova, being able to adjust to conflict. We presented some challenging situations for he and his team throughout the course of that game, but he adjusted, and he always was calm, cool, and collected. So Jay Wright is a very classy guy. He's one of the best tacticians that I have ever coached against. And now the byproduct of that, you can see how his players, especially the ones that are in the NBA, whether it's Mikal Bridges for the Phoenix Suns and Jalen Brunson, who had a breakout game, playoff game for the Dallas Mavericks versus the Utah Jazz in Game 2 of that series. They're all products of Jay Wright's system and his culture, his leadership, his tenacity. So I'm glad that he'll have a chance to ride off into the sunset on his own terms. And I'm also I'm really excited that he was able to participate in picking his successor, who I think is an amazing young coach that's going to do a heck of a job.
And we'll get to that in a moment. You just saw on that full screen, 520 wins in his 21 seasons, 30 wins or more in 6 campaigns, a Hall of Famer. He was inducted in 2021. And Gary, you just touched on this. This is a season, and this was a Final Four where both Coach K and Jay Wright leave the game of college basketball. How might that impact this game as a whole as we move towards next season? And I'll start with you on that one, Avery.
Well, I think it's going to impact it. And a lot of these coaches that are retiring, you got to remember when they started on their coaching journey, you didn't have anything like social media. And now you have the NIL, the transfer portal. So that could be pretty frustrating to a lot of the old school coaches. And I don't know how much that impacted their decision to retire. But when you look at Jay Wright, had fans known that he was going to retire after his Final Four, he would have been celebrated a whole lot more throughout the course of this season. He led Villanova to the Final Four as a high seed. And the way they did it, especially beating Houston and holding the Houston Cougars to 1 3-point basket and doing it in a defensive struggle, which has not really historically been the MO for Villanova. They've been a ball movement, player movement, offensive juggernaut of a team. But again, that speaks to Jay Wright coaching expertise and the way he can adjust and get the best out of his team.
Avery touched on something very important, and I don't think there's any question that it played a role in Jay's decision to retire at the age of 60, and that's that this sport has changed drastically and very quickly. When Jay Wright became a college head coach, social media did not exist. Not that he's the type of guy who's taking a beating on social media, but still, it's a thing that's there now that wasn't there before. Name, image, and likeness rights did not exist. The one-time transfer waiver did not exist. Other programs trying to get your players into the transfer portal to take advantage of that one-time transfer waiver and luring them with name, image, and likeness opportunities. That stuff didn't exist. Coaching college basketball at the highest level has always been a hard job, a demanding job, but it's never been harder or more demanding than it is right now. Avery can speak to this because he's coached in the NBA and coached in college basketball. When the NBA season is over, most coaches could disappear for several weeks if they wanted to, and it's not that big of a deal. You've got a front office that is going to handle your roster and your personnel decisions and draft preparation. If you're a college head coach, you've got to start re-recruiting your team immediately. You've got to recruit other players immediately. I don't want to say it's a 365-day-a-year job, but it is something close to that.
Yeah.
And yes, these men, especially men like Jay Wright, make a lot of money to do this hard job. But once you've got more money than you're probably ever going to need, if it's just not fun for you anymore and you don't think you need to coach anymore, like that urge is not going to be there forever bothering you, it actually makes a lot of sense to walk away at an age where you still have an incredible quality of life and theoretically a lot of years to enjoy. I think this is going to become more normal than abnormal. Coaches retiring, in their late 50s, early 60s. Just look at this past season. We had the Louisville coach basically say, I don't want to do this anymore. The Maryland coach say, I don't want to do this anymore. I don't think it's a coincidence that Mike Krzyzewski and Roy Williams both announced retirements within months of this sport changing in these ways. Again, nobody is arguing that the transfer portal shouldn't exist or that the one-time transfer waiver should be removed or that name, image, and likeness rights shouldn't be a thing. These are all good things for players, and it's about time that we've empowered the student athletes. But undeniably, it has created chaos. It has made the job more demanding, and I do think that almost certainly played a role in Jay Wright deciding to retire at least 10 or 15 years before some guys in this sport actually do.
Yeah, no doubt the dynamic in big-time college basketball coaching has changed. Along those lines, Kyle Neptune takes over following Wright. Did coach at Fordham, was on the bench with Wright for 10 years. But talk about the pressure of following in the footsteps of a program icon, the all-time winningest coach at Villanova. And Avery, I want to get your perspective as an ex-coach on that dynamic.
Well, I've taken over for a head coach on the NBA level for Don Nelson, but I was familiar with the program, the culture, the players, and it's the same thing with Kyle. He was an assistant at Villanova for 8 years. He's familiar with the flow, and it's not just the flow or the recruiting with the players, it's also the academic coordinator, the compliance director, the athletic director, the president, the board of trustees, the community. So you're getting a guy that's very familiar, and that's not going to be a significant adjustment period because of that familiarity. And because of that, I think this is going to be a smooth transition. The players from Villanova and the incoming recruits and their parents, I can't speak for them, but because they're hiring Kyle Neptune, I think this is going to be a smooth transition. They're not going to take a step back. And I'm happy for Kyle because he's not taking a program over that's going to be on probation. He's not taking a program that hasn't had any success in the NCAA tournament or winning championships. No, he's taking over a very healthy situation. And coaches like Kyle in his situation very rarely get this opportunity. So I'm so excited for him. And the cupboard is not bare. He's got some very talented players that's coming back. And this is because he and Jay Wright when they worked together, they laid this foundation, and now he can continue to build on Jay Wright's legacy to start his own legacy moving forward.
Gary, 8 seasons as an assistant at Nova, and Avery just touched on it. Many of the players that are there familiar with him. He might have recruited many of them. So that familiarity from the player's perspective, how important was this transition along those lines?
It'll be helpful. And, you know, Kyle is not only somebody who understands the Villanova culture and everything connected to that program, he's somebody who did have a really impressive first year as a head coach at Fordham. I know the record might not blow anybody away, but, you know, ask anybody who follows the sport closely to do what he did at Fordham this past season. You know, he did a really nice job. And I know, and you touched on this, that there's a saying in sports that you never want to follow a legend. And I certainly understand that, because it's almost as if a bar has been set that is probably very, very difficult, if not impossible, to reach. But the truth is, you know, Jon Scheyer is following a legend at Duke. And the alternative to that was Jon Scheyer not being the head coach at Duke. So in that case, you do want to follow a legend, because you can't possibly start your head coaching career in any better situation. Same thing for Hubert Davis at North Carolina, and now the same thing for Cal Neptune at Villanova. Like Avery touched on, this is an incredible opportunity for Kyle. It's a big jump from Fordham to Villanova, but if you're a Villanova fan looking for reasons to be optimistic, understand that Jay Wright could have almost certainly named anybody he wanted to be this next head coach, or just turned it over to the administration and say, it's not my thing to worry about. Jay Wright endorsed Cal Neptune, wanted this to happen, and that suggests to me that he's got a lot of confidence in him. Again, Cal has a tremendous reputation within the sport. Nothing is ever guaranteed, of course, but I could certainly envision a scenario where he keeps Villanova either at or near the tip-top of the Big East, and by extension, the college basketball in general.
Again, Jay Wright retiring after 21 seasons as head coach at Villanova, 2 national championships, 4 Final Fours, 520 career victories. We are thankful for Gary Parrish and Avery Johnson for the insight, and this is what you're getting with him walking out the door. I mentioned the national titles. Tourney is timed 16 times in the tournament. That record, 20 games above 500, and those 520 wins, the most in school history.
Do you want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis, no yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.